Well, welcome everyone to the second session in the Trellis Seminar Series 2021. For those of you who don't know us, Trellis is the charity that supports therapeutic gardening in Scotland, with over 480 gardening groups in our network. We provide information, training and good practice sharing, and we aim to promote the highest quality of therapeutic gardening services and enable everyone to get the best out of them. You can find links to all our resources online at the Trellis homepage. So today's session is approximately 60 minutes. There'll be a presentation from our guest speaker, Sallie Sillars, and then it will be followed by a Q&A session. So please use the chat feature to ask questions throughout the session, and one of the Trellis team will ask those questions to Sallie after the presentation. We'll be asking you for some feedback, and we'll post a survey link in the chat for you near the end of the session. So it's a real privilege to welcome our speaker today, Sallie Sillars. Sallie's going to share her presentation on Horatio's gardens and gardening for well-being and improving the lives of those affected by spinal injury. I'm just going to spotlight Sallie here so you can see it. So Sallie is head gardener and a horticultural therapist at Horatio's Garden at the Scottish National Spinal Injuries Unit, Queen Elizabeth University Hospital in Glasgow. She won Scotland's Gardener of the Year in 2017, and she studied landscape management and social and therapeutic horticulture after a career in textile design. So with no further ado, I'm going to pass you over now to Sallie, who will share her screen and her presentation.
Thank you, Jenny. Let's have a look. Hello. Thank you, and I hope you're all very well. Thank you, Trellis, for the invitation to be part of your seminar series this year. So, an introduction to our charity. It was back in 2017 when I first shared the Horatio's Garden story with you. And in this presentation, I will try and bring you up to date with the work of Horatio's Garden, share some horticultural and horticultural therapy tips that we've developed, and tell you about the impact that our work is producing. And I look forward to answering any questions that you may have at the end. Just bear with me while I try and get to the next. No, has it gone too far now? No, we're there. Thank you. It's got to have a glitch somewhere, hasn't it? So, those of you who've not heard about the charity, I would like to let you know about how it all started. Horatio's Chapel volunteered at the Duke of Spinal Cornwall Treatment Centre in Salisbury, where he recognised the need for the patients to be able to access a safe outdoor space. He wrote a research paper to champion the NHS Trust with this idea. Sadly, Horatio died before his vision could be realised, but his idea touched the hearts of many people who knew him or could relate to his story, and donations began to flood in. This culminated in the first Horatio's Garden at the Spinal Centre, where he volunteered. And in 2013, Horatio's Garden became an official charity, and his legacy was born. If you have a quick look at the map here, you can see there are 11 spinal centres across the country, 5 of which now have Horatio's Gardens. Another one is being built and another being fundraised for, and there will be 4 left to go. This slide shows the first garden. Its patient catchment area is the southwest region, and it's based in Salisbury. It opened in 2012. Designed by Cleve West, Cleve had a friend in the spinal unit and knew some of the challenges patients face. His garden set the benchmark for all future gardens, with accessibility and beauty being a key aspect. Landscaped with smooth bonded aggregate surfaces that allow bump-free wheeling of hospital beds and wheelchairs. There is a water rill, a garden pod and garden room, and a beautiful wisteria archway. The head gardener here is Stephen Hackett. The second garden, designed by James Alexander Sinclair, is our Scotland Garden, and that opened in 2016 at the Spinal Injuries Unit at the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital in Glasgow. I'll tell you a bit more about this later. The next garden, the third, is at Stoke Mandeville. It was designed by Joe Swift in 2018. It opened. It's at the National Spinal Injury Centre, which supports adults but also children. There's a beautiful garden room, a lovely water feature, and accessible greenhouse. And there is lovely year-long interest across the borders in the planting scheme. The head gardener here is Amy Moffat. Cleve, James and Joe are all great friends, and they all say they have the best garden, but of course it's Scotland, I'm biased. The fourth garden was the Midlands Spinal Centre in Oswestry, designed by Bunny Guinness. It opened in 2019 in the Robert Jones and Agnes Hunt Orthopaedic Hospital. This is a very pretty garden with roses, herbaceous borders, and a magnificent magnolia tree, which actually I don't think you can see in the pictures here. And it's incorporated from the original garden. The head gardener here is Imogen Jackson. The fifth garden, the London and South East, it's based at Stanmore in London. It's designed by Tom Stewart Smith. It's located in the Royal National Orthopaedic Hospital. This garden opened last year and it was planted during the pandemic under tight restrictions. No mean feat, literally. Ashley Edwards is the head gardener here. We now have a great team of head gardeners and we all learn from each other and pool our differing expertise to take each garden forward and make it as beautiful and busy as possible. The sixth gardening line is Cardiff in Wales, and it's been designed by Sarah Price. Building work has just begun, and it's designed with a new hospital site, which is first for the charity. Normally, we fit into an existing site. Finally, fundraising for the seventh garden in Northern Ireland in Belfast has just begun, and that will be designed by Andy Sturgeon. Each garden follows a theme that fits its intended use, that each brings with it an individual design stamp, making it more unique in every way. Competition to be the designer for the next garden has grown year on year. So to Scotland. This beautiful garden has been designed with patients in mind, and like all the gardens, consultation with the hospital trusts, their staff, the patients and their families is considered. This makes the garden fit for purpose, but it's the designer's eye that brings out the beauty of each site. James had a specific area to design, and this is the inner courtyard where he created small glazed heated rooms we call garden pods. From these rooms, patients can sit and reflect, and in time, once again, they will be back to meeting friends and family soon. Staff can take time out and everyone has the opportunity to relax from daily stresses, maybe have their lunch in this nice non-clinical area and just watch the changes taking place in the garden. I asked James if he could sum up a few thoughts about the garden, and he's just simply shared, I love this garden, I love the plants, I love the buildings, I love the site, and I love the calm it brings into the middle of a busy city. But most of all, I love the way it affects people. Let no one doubt the power of gardens to heal and soothe. The courtyard picture here, you can just see the kitchen pod at the top of the photo here, and the patients can come and make their own cup of tea and coffee. We hope to be able to bring back our tea and cake soon. Horticulturally, this garden tends to be a bit of a frost pocket and it's late to get going, but when it does, the interest lasts right through the winter. Flower heads and seed heads are left as structural interest, which we've just started to cut back over the last couple of weeks to allow the bulbs to flourish. Here you can see some of the summer display of the herbaceous perennials. The orange flower is the Echinacea hot summer, and the panic and north wind grass in the background is beautiful. When the wind rustles through it, it makes a gorgeous sound. Colours constantly change, starting with a variety of tulips. This year we've had Slough, which will take intense, dramatic contrasting orange edges, and it'll certainly attract a lot of attention. As these fade, the alliums and herbaceous planting takes over, culminating in rich purples and bronzes well into late summer. Seasonal aspects are celebrated. We really went to town this Christmas. Everyone joined in the decorating. Patients were particularly isolated at this point, and we supported them through it by keeping them busy. It coincided with a great social group of patients, and this tends to wax and wane throughout the year as patients come and go. But the moments that we acknowledge and champion, providing patient-led activities to celebrate the diversity of patient needs. We've celebrated Diwali, we've made lanterns, Christmas decorations, obviously, and Christmas wreath making was very we've grown Japanese greens and plantains and chilies, and we're happy to explore any patient's wish for meaningful activity, to grow a hobby or start a new one, instilling a can-do attitude to build confidence and self-esteem. This slide shows one of the courtyard pods. Most of the photos are pre-lockdown, but it must be said all these areas have been in use. I've just skipped a slide. They provide little oases of calm, and patients use them to make phone calls to loved ones, work on their laptops, or maybe sunbathe at any opportunity that we can. The pods are heated and get used all year round. Spinal injury trauma affects everyone surrounding the patient, and recovery is often slow. It takes time. An average stay is about 5 months. It usually requires a period of bed rest, and sometimes repeatedly. Wheelchair use takes time to negotiate, and it's a long, hard process accompanied by pain, surgery, and getting medication right. Any sense of normality is very difficult to find. Hearing from patients and their families and the staff how the garden helps is just wonderful. Just to share some of the patient numbers of the unit with you, share the unit write an annual report. It's available online if you're very interested. The numbers that come into the unit, for example, from April 2019 to March 2020, admissions were 139 new patients. They treated 645 day cases and 1,984 outpatients. So I total it to over 2,700 patients in the garden, and that doesn't include their friends and their family. The need is very great. Alongside the wards are 2 other gardens. They wrap round the unit, providing greenery to look out upon. The woodland garden runs along the outer edge, flanked by the rehab Phillips Hill ward on one side, and the A7739, the Clyde Tunnel Road, on the other. Traffic noise is muted by a soundproofing fence, and as the trees fill out and leaf up, it makes a huge difference. This garden is a wildlife haven. The pathway here that you can see is designed to slow movement through the garden, giving you a tantalising view ahead, and it encourages you to explore further. Patients love discovering this garden. Silver birches create a diffuse light within the canopy, and herbaceous borders filled with snowdrops, daffodils and crocus and wood anemones in spring give long-awaited colour. And this culminates in an explosion of rich tapestry of hues in the autumn. This latest spring slide gives another window into the beauty of the garden. Seasons are very important. They help to establish a place in time. At the point of injury, everything stops. Focus is on the trauma, the change it brings, and how to get better. Slowly in time, awareness of everything else comes into focus, and the garden acts as a subtle draw towards a reconnection with life, away from the pain and the uncertainty that the injury may have brought. I suppose the pandemic is the metaphor for us. Coming out of lockdown is the nearest most of us will come to experiencing such a journey. We now recognise the feeling of wellness gardens can inspire, and have all been drawn to them. They've been our safe places to connect with, creating a constant source of respite from the news of the pandemic and everything it has brought with it. A very small insight into the challenges that patients face whilst in the unit. So we know gardens boost our mood. They promote a feeling of well-being. In fact, just looking at this photo can do that. Seeing the beauty of the garden and watching the changes that happen, wildlife it brings, and smelling the flowers and autumn leaves, the invitation to touch, brush past overhanging flowers, it's literally all there. There is so much research. Please take a look at our website for more details if you wish. Inside the wards, it's very hot and stuffy, smells are clinical, noise is ever present. Patients often talk about feeling the fresh air and tasting the rain. Outside the ward is where patients start to discover what they can feel. Tetraplegic patients with high neck injury who have no feeling below their shoulders relish feeling the rain or sunshine on their faces. The mental capacity I see in patients to adapt and come to terms with a new way of life is awe-inspiring. I had to share this snow scene. It's the first really deep snow we've had in the garden. A reminder, perhaps, that wheelchairs don't work in the snow, unless, of course, it's fine. You can see the lower shot here in the bottom right-hand corner. It does show that enjoyment will and can be found in the garden. We garden using organic methods as much as possible. We use peat-free, reduce and reuse and recycle. Increasing biodiversity is a responsibility I take very seriously. It benefits the garden for the long term, as well as providing continual interest for the patients. And year on year, we see much more, which means we have more potential for patients to take part in the survey. And this year, I hope we'll be looking at bumblebees, butterflies, and all manner of bugs for surveys this year. So to our volunteers, we couldn't do without them. Some continued to provide essential maintenance for the garden during lockdown. It's been wonderful to have them on board after the short break, and they've adapted to new ways of working well. Apart from helping to keep the garden up to standard, they've been given a much needed reason to get out of the house. And we're savvy now in the ways of everything PPE and social distancing. Hopefully they will soon be back in more numbers, supporting patients' activities as everything opens up. Those that could not come in have been supporting the garden from afar, utilising crafting skills to make some beautiful gifts for fundraising, appreciated by the patients and staff alike. Working and keeping in touch with each other virtually has been a lifeline for us all. The future is very bright and ideas are flowing, and patient activities and events are in the planning. Once again, there are exciting times ahead. So where we've seen the garden surroundings providing a subtle and passive level of engagement promotes a sense of well-being, our tailored garden activities create a richer opportunity for furthering patient development. Using my social and therapeutic horticultural training, I target specific patient needs through structured activities to promote their physical rehabilitation and that sense of improved mental health and well-being we keep talking about. Patients can be referred to us by the therapy teams, the occupational therapists or the physiotherapists, or patients can request our support directly. At the moment, one-to-one sessions and ready-made activities are part of our routine, but at present, garden visits and chats on sunny days are as valuable. There continues to be a no visitor policy, which has been in place since last April, apart from a very brief window in midsummer, where relatives were allowed to have conversations through windows. It's not quite the real thing. Throughout the pandemic, we've been developing ways of working. Time can go very slowly for patients, and thinking outside the box to provide activities of all kinds, whilst maintaining the required level of safety, has been a challenge, but it's not been impossible. In horticultural therapy, we talk a lot about therapeutic value. Any activity can be therapeutic, but it depends on how it's managed to determine its value. We keep activities meaningful, interesting, and relevant, and help to engage the participant, allowing for it to have impact on the person taking part and hopefully create a positive outcome. Quite simply, if it's interesting and the participant can relate to it in some level, be that through a metaphor, a past experience, or skill-based learning, they will achieve on many levels through doing that activity. Physical and mental well-being outcomes often interlink and can run alongside each other. But it's important never to underestimate the simple enjoyment of doing something and having fun. Gardening throughout the pandemic has taught many of us exactly that. A simple, profound reason to do something, to have fun, and one we instill in everything that we do. People have started to talk about a childlike fascination in their surroundings as if they're seeing something for the first time. And we've learned to stop and stare at the little things once again. Hospitals are clinical spaces where measuring and evaluating progress is the norm. And we do not want to add to that. We offer something very different. Maintaining opportunity for fascination in the natural world is something we should all carry well into the future. We'll definitely feel better for it. So planning. It is essential in horticulture, and as a practitioner or gardener, you all know timing is very important. Playing with that timing to create activities creates a year-long resource that can be tapped into. It's a lifelong undertaking. You never stop learning, and there's always so much to consider. Some of you may look at these slides and see bulbs and a vase of flowers. Perhaps the horticulturalists in you will see the narcissi, the hyacinth, and a variety of herbaceous flowers, or sweet peas in this case. Some of you may be considering the therapeutic value of the items. Planting bulbs to look to the future, creating a sense of hope, plant care, a metaphor for self-care, achieving a task to raise confidence and self-esteem. It's all there. Some of you may even be looking at the environmental impacts of these items, peat-free composts, reduces, reusing and recycling. Others really look at it and see some amazing planning. In fact, that's the one, all of these things were considered. I have a very multitasking job. I've developed worksheets for a variety of activities that patients or occupational therapists can follow. Setting achievable goals are always considered, but not set in stone. Flexibility is key, and adaptation to the activity aim is always possible. The target outcome is always aimed to be a positive one, and results help me to plan ahead for the future, and you never stop learning. Each individual has their own rehabilitation path, but keeping expectations realistic is important for forward progress, however small that may be. Consider the location of where we are. Outside is always preferable, but not always possible. And maybe somewhere that's a bit sheltered or quieter, where you can engage with somebody who just needs that little bit more of attention. And sessions, look at time scale. We never try and run anything longer, I don't, than 30 minutes. Either side of that, we're talking and we're discussing, but actually patients are often quite ill, and anything over and above that time is just far too long. Obviously, those that are able, we just keep going, and we'll replan and come back to things all the time. So a few hints and a few tips that I can share. Things that work for us, obviously garden-linked activities are very popular. They're just so powerful, it's very simplistic. Keeping it simple is often producing the most profound results. Don't overcomplicate activities, but connect and talk with who you're working with. You know where to gauge the activity and what to include in it. If you set a time and a location, planning ahead and a place where to meet them always gives the sense of looking forward and looking ahead. Does it need to be quiet? Does it need to be sociable? Look at specific site areas and the tasks involved. Have everything to hand. And be flexible. Adaptations are always needed. However much you plan, they're always required. Explaining how an activity can help also helps. Sometimes just ignore it, just get on with it. The fun element can just be enough. Learning what the patients will benefit from is something you learn to read, but always chat at the end of an activity to find out what it can lead into next. And benefit the patient has got, and what benefit that patient's got from the activity, however simple. Challenges we've all been facing, I think we've shared the pandemic one, but it's pushed us further to adapt than any of us ever considered before. Coming to terms with that challenge will mark the past year for all of us and how we work going forward. But we should celebrate the tenacity of having got this far. Looking at the positive sides and what we've learned has been my personal way through. Another challenge for us in the garden is the weather can definitely limit us. We have been using a very large gazebo that's helped us to work outside, and that's been very popular. It's also used for visitors when they come, and hopefully we'll be setting that back up again very soon for both those uses. Our new dedicated space, the garden rooms in the building, and that'll be very completed very soon. And also the garden area surrounding that to be redesigned. So we've got a very busy time ahead of us, but exciting to have that dedicated space. So this year I plan to continue to promote the benefits of our activities, educating the staff and patients to the link between gardening and wellbeing for them and the patients, and try and get some of them to help out. Staff activity days have been popular in the past, and they help raise awareness from our work, so they actually experience it firsthand. There's always a need to educate the staff on what benefits them as well. Our volunteer support is essential, and once again, we will adapt to whatever the changing needs require. Having more volunteers in the garden will be absolutely magic, and we miss the social interaction, and it's tantalisingly close when we can all be back in the garden. Be it with masks or without, we will definitely find a way. So starting a very brief summary, things which work well for us. We have a unique environment in that patients stay in the unit for such a long time, and that gives us greater potential to expand on activities and potentially have a greater impact on the patient wellbeing. This can run over a period of months, and skill development can be a focus as health challenges fluctuate and impact negatively on clinical goals. Our activities can act as a positive reset point for patients to focus on. And their rollercoaster journey back into improving health is not an easy one. Patients guide the activity process that we do, and we remain on hand to support that journey with encouragement and gentle persuasion if it's required. One-to-one sessions are always a very good starting point, and they can build confidence in patients that are just not quite confident enough to start in a social setting. We celebrate the seasons, seed sowing, nurturing, and share, better activity could there be. Everything seen here was grown in the garden by patients, and we're lucky to have a rehabilitation kitchen facility and occupational therapy and adaptive cooking skills as a popular hand therapy session. Why wouldn't we provide fresh fruit and produce for that? From seed sowing, plant nurture to harvest and eat has always been a popular therapeutic pathway. Exploring creativity through art and poetry. We often bring in experts to share their skills where volunteers or ourselves don't have them. We're always on the lookout for more, and if you have a skill you think you could share, please just get in touch. The examples here, gathering the flowers that were placed in a mandala with 3D effect. I would love to be able to take this idea a step further and maybe photograph and scan the images to create more images that patients could access quite easily. The second picture, the face of the wolf. This was created by a tetraplegic patient. We previously pressed some flowers that she'd chosen in the garden, and we just started by placing the flowers wherever she wanted them on the paper, and it transformed into a face and eventually this lovely wolf. I was able to laminate it and staff put it up by her bed, and she created a little mini art gallery by her bed by the end of the day. It just shows you what can be created. These lovely tulip leaves. This is a patient who's just absolutely fascinated by the colours in the garden, and these petals. She'd wait for them to drop. She was very good. She didn't pick the flowers, and she'd collect them. She chose the blue background. That contrast is such a beautiful picture. And the lady on the right hand side, she adored the flowers, always encouraging to pick flowers, and twice a week she would fill vases and place them all around the unit, share her achievement, and also taking ownership of that was lovely. Now I'm completely lost where I am. Let's have a look. So where am I? Next page. I do like a star diagram, so I did have to include one, just to share some of the things that we think in our work benefits the health and well-being of the patients. Making room for enjoyment is there. I've highlighted it once again. All the mood-enhancing activities that we do and help level out that roller coaster ride back to improved health, I've mentioned previously. So shared experience, another powerful tool in horticultural therapy, looking towards the next few weeks and looking forward. And as the weather improves, we can hopefully work outside once again. Socially distanced and social groups 3 and 4s will be possible, but carefully managed and planned, it'll be all fine. Some patients might be reluctant to take part. Perhaps there's a fear of failing in front of others, but these are the patients, if you just encourage them to sit and watch, will soon become part of a group. And these social groups, they're just sharing like-minded injury. The social groups are very tight-knit and they really do benefit each other. It's just fascinating to see the dynamics working in groups like this. But yeah, it's fantastic. I can't say how well it works in that setting. So every year we produce an impact report. This time it was compiled in lockdown. We weren't quite sure what the results were going to be. But as you can see from the slide, it's all very positive. So we looked at social morale of patients. Obviously, this is what's lacking in our lives at the moment. The impact on patients was obviously double-fold. But it just shows you the benefit that the garden had during this time was still working. And while patients missed their friends and families, they had turned to each other. Apart from sharing commonality, they do make lifelong friends. And we've just developed a Facebook page for them to encourage conversations that they can have with each other whilst they're in the unit, but also once they leave. Testimonials form an amazing platform of evidence for us, and capturing stories is an essential part of our job. They also help to reaffirm why we do what we do. Impact on physical ability. Again, sunshine heralds more activity in the garden. It helps with sleep. It impacts on everything, as well as the motor skills targeted in activities. Patients that move around the garden to explore are unwittingly improving their physical ability. Wheelchair takes skill and strength. Training ground for what awaits once patients get home. This young mum was able to be taken outdoors in a hospital bed, and whilst her young children played, we've had a play area in the garden, and she recalled it with us in a testimonial, and she enjoyed the garden during her very long stay. These are the moments of normality we want to create more of. Mental health and well-being, well, hopefully smiles say it all, and I think hopefully I've covered that in this presentation. Staff survey results. Taking time to visit the garden on a busy day with the stress pandemic was essential to the staff well-being, and it continues to be that way. Hearing their views about the garden, especially this last year, has been very positive. They needed to snatch every opportunity they could to get through, even if it was just a diverted yard instead of going through a corridor. And being able to press reset and really relieve the stress that was evidently going on was essential for many. Undoubtedly, their appreciation of the garden has grown. And staff feel well, their work improves, and days off through illness decline. The garden benefits them so much. And finally, just a couple of slides, a couple of patient testimonials. And yes, the picture here, I do enjoy my job very much. We all do. And a man of very few words. Horatio's garden has helped me a lot. And that's the end of my presentation. I hope I've not spoken too long, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Sally. Perhaps you could unshare your screen, Sally, and we'll
Well,
pass over to Joe for some questions.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Sally. That was lovely. First question for you. What plants do you use for winter colour?
for winter colour, it tends to be the structure of the architectural structure of the seed heads in the winter. And so we've got a lot of hydrangeas, and leaving the seed heads on makes some beautiful structure, architectural structure across the garden. So what have we got? We've got paniculata limelight, we've got hydrangea confetti, we've got, I'm trying to think what else there is. We've got Aruncus Horatio, which is another one with very pretty seed heads, and all the grasses we leave. So rather than colour, it's probably a rich tapestry that goes from very rich reds in the woodland to very soft muted browns and hues through the garden.
That's great. Marion asks, do you involve patients in future garden planning and planting based on their experiences whilst in the unit?
We all have little areas in the garden. I've got a cuttings bed, flower cutting bed, and that's planned every year. We have raised beds, which we can plan, and just maintaining the garden. There's all sorts of activities that patients can get involved with within the garden itself. So it's designed a certain way so that it encourages interaction. But yes, planting food to eat is a very big thing. So always planning what we've got in the greenhouse. But yeah, patient-led. If there's something they want to grow, something they want to reconnect with, we'll do it.
And can they potter, in the garden if they just want to, or are they generally?
Yes, they can potter. We have adaptive tools. If they just want to go through the garden, they can do that. If they want to harvest something, if it's there ready to eat, they can do that.
Katie asks, how many staff work in the garden? What are the different roles, and do clinical staff also get involved in supporting gardening activity?
Yes, right. Okay, where do I start? So myself, head gardener, horticultural therapist. There's an administrator who supports the garden 2 days a week, and that's it staff-wise. Volunteers support the rest of the garden. So I keep saying they're essential to what they do. They are, but they bring with them so many different skills, not just skills, all sorts. And we tap into that all the time. And it's one of the parts of the job I love, engaging volunteers to utilise those skills if they want to, to take part in activities and helping out in the garden whatever way. And sorry, what was the last bit of that question?
Last question was, do clinical staff also get involved in supporting gardening activity?
They do. So occupational therapists can come out to run their hand therapy sessions, but I also encourage staff to come out in special days where they can come and learn about the garden. We've got a core team of staff who are very interested. I'm constantly being asked about how to do this in my garden, but actually giving them sort of garden training days where they do learn about horticultural things engages them in their garden, and they're very proud to have this garden, and it just instills that sense of pride a bit further. So if they want to come out, they're more than welcome, and yes, anytime.
The more the merrier, I would imagine.
Exactly.
How do you go about recruiting your volunteers?
How do you go about treating them?
Recruiting them.
Recruiting. We treat them nicely though.
Treat them nicely. Good. Glad to hear it.
Recruiting wise, well, so the garden administrator, if you want to contact her or me or through the charity as the first step, we invite you in, we let you have a look at the garden, see the sort of tasks that there are. We have a chat, there's training involved, there's all sorts of little stages as we go along. So we're finding the right slot for you within the group. At the moment, we are limited with the amount of volunteers that we can have in the garden, but as time moves on, this will change and we'll start to need a lot more people. And as we develop that new area of garden, we're going to need a lot of help on the ground, definitely.
Where does your funding come from? That's a question from Maria. And does the NHS contribute?
The NHS contribute in small ways, yes they do, and the answer to the other is everywhere. Anywhere, everywhere. Trusts, corporate, all over.
Excellent. Another question from Maria. Are past patients encouraged to return and get involved in the garden, or do they get signposted to kind of community projects that they might be able to access?
Is that patients, sorry?
Yeah, patients who have left the unit.
Yes, I can signpost, which is something we do. If they're very interested in gardening or any other activity or club, then we try and signpost them through. There are other supporting charities, so if it's not within gardening, maybe some of the other charities can help. But yes, we're always trying to connect them with something that takes them further on in their rehabilitation once they leave. It's not the end of the story once they go.
Do you have activities that you kind of bring indoors, if you like, if say the weather's doesn't permit?
Yeah, we can bring seed sowing inside. I have one of the lovely plastic potting trays. I have a few of them. In fact, we're allowed to take those into occupational therapy, hand therapy. So again, anything we can. Once we get this dedicated space, we'll be able to do a bit more as well. So much more in fact. So where hand therapy tends to be geared towards patients who need to develop their manual dexterity, the paraplegic patients whose upper level is great, they don't often get involved in activities because we don't have the space for them. Now we've got this dedicated space, we can use it for all patients, obviously unless it's outside, but then we're, obviously it depends what the weather's doing. It's opening it up to everybody, which is lovely.
Brilliant. Let's see, what other questions do we have here? I think probably a lot of them have been answered in your presentation, to be honest.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we've got, that's all our questions. Another one in here from Maria, actually, sorry. Are there specific health and safety considerations working with this patient group?
Most definitely, yes. Huge amount. Volunteers are taught what it is like to have a spinal injury. They're taught to sit in a wheelchair. There are specific illnesses that patients can have because they're losing a sensory aspect within their body. They can injure themselves without realizing it. And there's something called autonomic dysreflexia, where their bodies go into a stress reaction to some sort of form of injury, and you have to be able to recognize those signs. Obviously, all gardening involves certain risk. So it's washing hands, it's keeping within the guidelines that you would do normally. Everything is involved, but also being aware of potential patient on new medication, just the trauma that they've been through. There's so much to consider. So we offer that insight into what that is like to anybody who's new coming into the garden. They need to know that first.
Excellent question here from Julie. Can you give an example of adapted tools, please?
My favourite one, believe it or not, is a spoon. It's as simple as that. So the occupational therapists are very clever using Velcro and a grippy piece of plastic, I don't know what it's called, but helping grip where the person has lost their grip. Some patients will have straps around their hands that a spoon can be inserted into. Obviously, with injury, you have to keep the tools quite light at that initial stage, and a spoon is just fantastic, or a little beaker. Some of the bigger adaptive tools are great, but they're not too heavy, and it's really finding those lightweight tools and long reach tools in the garden that patients can manage. And you will find that maybe the patient will find their way through if they really want to do something. Occupational therapists are really clever at how to adapt that grip, that person, to achieve something in the garden that way with tools.
Great. We've also got, for whoever asked the question, lots of fact sheets on our website about adaptive tools and adaptive gardening and things. So for whoever asked that question. Another one here from Maria. What evaluation or measurement tool do you use?
We don't. We use research, the research that's out there. So at the moment, we're not recording, we're not monitoring and evaluating, we're taking testimonials. If that became part of my work, it would have to be probably another day's work. I mean, it's a huge amount that we manage in the garden, but we don't need to at this stage. It's the possibility is there, the opportunity arises, then great. I have the training, I have the knowledge to do that. But at the moment, we don't need to, so we don't do it. Sharing our annual report with the testimonials that we take is enough. Having that feedback is our way of proving the efficacy of what we do. Why would we then now go back the way and monitor and evaluate to prove something we know works? Does that answer that? I mean, yeah, there's a reason to do it for research. I think that's brilliant. And at some point, I think that will happen. I would like to think it would happen, but at the moment we don't do it.
Thank you. Another question from Aggie here. Do you have access to medical records of your patients when you prepare your sessions? So do you know?
No, but I do have conversations with the occupational therapists, like training and awareness now of what can go wrong. I think is quite sound. Obviously, you always could get caught out. However, the experts are on hand in the immediate vicinity. We know what to do in an emergency. We know where the specialists are. They're just literally on hand. So, yeah, you've just got to be aware of everything.
Another question here. Do you compare what you do with other sites in the UK in terms of sharing good practice? I would imagine you do, obviously, within your own.
Within the charity, yes, constantly in touch with each other. I was mentioned about the other head gardeners. We now have a lovely team that we're sharing skills. We're sharing what we do in the garden weekly, if not daily. We're in touch with each other. It's really created a platform of learning, which we haven't had right at the beginning, and it's a very dynamic process. We all have different skill sets, but we all have the same aim, which is lovely. And as a charity, we're starting to share. We talk. We do a lot of conferences. We're sharing, information about the charity as much as possible, and that is part of our roles.
Lovely, thank you. I think that's your quiz time's over. I think. Well done, Sallie.
Thank you.
That's lovely. Thank you very much indeed, Sallie, for your insights into how you deliver your therapeutic gardening. That was really excellent, and lots of fantastic feedback there from people saying thank you so much, and thank you for your enlightening information on how you collect your feedback, because that's very appreciated, and lots of people saying thank you very much. That's very inspiring. So can I just, as well as all this that's coming in the chat, can I just invite people to show your appreciation to Sally? Use your reaction button. You can hover over that and we can give a round of applause. Thank you very much indeed, Sally. That was absolutely excellent.
It's lovely to see everybody's names, actually. Thank you for the invitation to talk. Thank you.
An absolute pleasure. Absolutely wonderful. Thank you. So I just like to thank everyone who's taken part today. Thank you very much indeed. And thank you to those who have donated to Trellis. If you haven't done that already, please consider doing that. There'll be a link in the chat there for you to do that, and that supports further work like this, where we can bring all this shared expertise to you through the medium of Zoom. So thank you. You may also be interested in our plastic-free gardening book, which is also available. I think there's going to be a link there on the chat. That's fantastic. Thank you. So I would like to bring this session to a close. Thank you very much indeed for sharing it with us. And we hope that we're going to see you a bit later on in the week. We've got many other sessions. Please have a look at the website and see what's available and sign up for 60 minutes of inspiration. That's fantastic.